Make sure you're on green. You're on green? All right.
Yay.
Thank you for coming to the small business meeting today. We only have one agenda item, and that is the proposed food truck ordinance from the Planning Commission. We have a little bit of background this time that we did not have last time. I spoke with Mr. Powers, who's our Safety Service Director, about kind of the history of the ordinance and what the city's thoughts are. Essentially, they are wanting to leave it as much up to council as possible, but the city does have some questions that they are going to submit to the committee via a letter. We do not have that yet, but some of the things to consider, which will probably be included on this letter, are things like what constitutes a mobile food vendor? Are we keeping things strictly to a truck? Are we including a trailer? If you have seen the hot dog cart, that is like a standalone, non-drivable unit.
Mm-hmm.
So are we counting anything that is outside as a mobile food vendor if it cannot move on its own and needs to be hooked up to something? Things to consider. In terms of allowing them on private property, what zones are we considering and what restrictions might be included with that? That is going to be asked on those questions as well. So just a couple things to keep in mind that the city is going to want to know. I sent everyone on the committee and Mr. Powers the sample legislation from the Institute for Justice, which I think is a good jumping off point. I think some things in here don't apply to us very well, and some things I just don't really agree with. I don't know how everyone else feels about it. But also Amy is here, who is the president of the Cincinnati Food Truck Association, and she has worked on helping other municipalities write ordinances around food trucks. So she is a marvelous, wonderful resource. Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, Amy, the gentleman over to your right are all food truck operators.
Oh, very nice. Okay, so I feel like maybe you might be a great place for us to start. If you can be on the microphone, just so the TV can hear you.
Yeah, and just make sure that it's on green.
The little button is
It
push
is
the button.
green.
Perfect.
It is green, so we're good. Yeah?
We are good. Yeah, so what are your thoughts? What have you done in the past?
So I think a good starting point would be kind of how Cincinnati Food Truck Association replied to some outreach from City of Cincinnati as far as their ordinance and how they had worded it, because they initially put the ordinance together not really contemplating how that would affect some of the contracts that they already had with other entities in the city as far as event operation, parking, that sort of thing, as well as private businesses that also utilized food trucks for catering, special events, that sort of thing, and how that ordinance that at that moment was written was going to affect and overlap in all of those spaces. Specifically, there was kind of like a concert special events venue theater that hosted several different private parties, that sort of thing, for businesses, corporations, and their ordinance overlapped with their ability to do so and offer private catering events and that sort of thing through food truck businesses to offer that. And it would not have been possible had they kept that ordinance as it was written initially. So what we did was kind of work with them to try to understand, first and foremost, what was the initial reason for the thoughts and processes for implementing an ordinance? What was the initial problem that they were looking to find a solution for? And what we found with City of Cincinnati was the main problem was foot traffic, bottlenecking in their high traffic, foot traffic areas, especially in the bar zones, where late at night, there's a whole lot of traffic, and when there are mobile units or food trucks that pull up unannounced without any sort of scheduling in place or understanding, that it caused a lot of bottlenecking and just a lot of overlap with a lot of the brick and mortar businesses that were there. In kind of researching that, we found that a lot of these mobile units that were doing that were not really registered with anything specific. They were not working with any sort of business model per se, and I guess in better terms, just kind of like a fly-by-night mobile unit. So in order to kind of coordinate better opportunity for parking, not have so much overlap, and not impede any traffic flow and that sort of thing, we were able to put some language into that ordinance that was more specific in the allowance of where trucks were allowed to park in those really congested areas. And then also try to figure out some language that would be helpful as far as brick and mortar agreements along with food trucks. We're all small business owners, and we all want each other to do well, whether they're a brick and mortar or a mobile unit. And for the most part, I would say the majority of food trucks, whether you belong to an association or not, follow all of the same permitting, inspection, insurance, that sort of thing that a brick and mortar would. We have to have the same sort of equipment, we have to have the same commercial equipment, and as a matter of fact, most times food trucks are inspected far more often than a brick and mortar, not only for health department, but also for fire. We not only have to have an annual permit, but oftentimes wherever we're pulled up, whether it's at an event or private, often fire departments will come and make sure that we are still in compliance with the fire code and with all of the equipment that we need with our inspections on our trucks, whether it's our ANSEL system and fire suppression, our different fire prevention, I should say, actions or courses or recall that we have like within our own businesses. So there's quite a bit of oversight that happens with food trucks, contrary to popular belief. So we were kind of able to work on those lines and a better understanding of how food trucks work as a whole in order to kind of reform the language a little bit to have that understanding, and then also to try to see what would work and how to kind of bridge that relationship between mobile units and brick and mortars. So how can we go about that? 9 times out of 10, if a food truck is pulled up, oftentimes they have been asked to be there. There's some sort of agreement in place as far as what they're providing for that specific occasion. Or with the private property owner that has asked them to be there, either they have a percentage of sales that they share from like a profit sharing perspective once they meet their minimum and they have started to kind of like turn a profit, they share a percentage of their sales, or simply they pay a regular monthly rent, if you will. So if they have a regular schedule and they have a regular agreement with that private property owner, they're paying rent in order to utilize that space and be there. So they have some skin in the game when you're looking at the full big picture as well. So in order to kind of, like I said, bridge that gap, the language that was proposed and implemented at City of Cincinnati was basically they don't want to have a food truck pulling up in front of a brick and mortar so that they're both kind of fighting for that same foot traffic, right? And if they are, they have the permission of that brick and mortar owner. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I don't have the language in front of me right now, but I believe the agreement is it's within 100 feet of a brick and mortar. And if they are parked within 100 feet of the brick and mortar, they have written permission from that brick and mortar owner. So that brick and mortar owner knows when and where they're going to be there, how long, and that sort of thing. If they're selling to the public, or if it's kind of like a private catered event where that either event organizer or the person that is utilizing that space during that time, they have a contract, they know how many people that they're going to be serving at any given time, and then they go from there. So I think kind of making it more specific in that ordinance instead of just like a broad, you can't park here sort of thing, or we're gonna tell you where you can park, there's a better understanding of all of kind of the stakeholders and all of it, and how we can work together as opposed to working against each other to put up barriers for one another to be able to do business, and how we can work kind of in the same place and together so that everyone's successful. We've started communicating also with the city of Reading. They're contemplating doing the same thing, and the basis of that conversation started out the same way. what is the issue that you're having and what prompted you to kind of think that, okay, I think we need an ordinance or we need to implement some sort of language for mobile units. So that's kind of where we're at with them. We're just kind of getting started in the conversations with that one. And I think theirs was something similar as far as foot traffic and impeding traffic and how do they kind of police that, kind of pulling up into spaces that create sort of disorder in their traffic flow. So just a little version of what we've worked on in other places and what we're continuing to work on. So, but as far as the association goes, we have been in place for 11 years now. We were established in 2013 specifically for this, to be able to advocate for the industry. At that time, it was a very up-and-coming industry, and now the industry, as well as our association, has grown quite a bit, but the advocacy still is in place. So now that people are learning more, utilizing food trucks more, how can we be in a position that we can help both the communities as well as the small business food trucks so that everyone's successful and that we can all be on the same page as far as understanding how our business models work. So if that explains it, I know that was pretty windy, but.
That's okay. I have so two things. Just so you know, like where this is coming from, this does not really stem from any kind of traffic issue or bottlenecking issue or anything. Our city's planning commission sent this down to council. And from what I've learned from speaking to people on the commission, the goal was not to ban trucks, but the way that it was worded essentially did. So council pretty much immediately said, we're not interested in passing this in any close to form of what it is, and sent it to committee. And in committee and with talking to truck owners, we've kind of figured out that there just is no legislation surrounding food trucks at all. And it's turning into an issue where they don't have any protection. And that's not what we want. I don't want
There's no city legislation.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
there is no city
Gotcha.
level legislation. And so what we don't want to happen is for us to say, no, we don't want to pass this ordinance, so we're just going to drop it and move on. And then in 2 years for someone else to bring it up. So we want to have legislation in place that protects the truck owners, that gives them kind of, here is a standard operating procedure on how we go about this, so that they don't then have to worry about this
Sure.
in 2 years or in 4 years or whatever. So we are not really having any major like traffic issues or anything like that. The concern from the planning commission was trucks that operate on business properties. So quite a few of our trucks operate at gas stations, essentially full time, and we have a few in like shopping plazas. And that is kind of where the commission was coming from with that. So we have kind of talked over like a few potential solutions, potential ways to go about it. I know that the city of Cincinnati has like designated vending zones. Do you know offhand, in those zones, can anyone who has like a peddling license, a vending license, just show up and vend there at any time? Is there like a time window or a place they have to register for a slot or something? How does that work?
That's a good question. So with City of Cincinnati, they have a couple of different licenses. Their peddler's license would cover that kind of like the hot dog carts that you see like in front of the courthouses and that sort of thing. That's completely different than what is a mobile food license. And that is gone about in a different way. We kind of use that as an association. When we looked at our bylaws that we have for our association, what constitutes, I know the first question that you were talking about was what constitutes a mobile food vendor. The language that we have in our bylaws is based on, are they self-contained? If it is like a cart or a trailer, is it self-contained in that it's 2 axles, it's covered, it's not an open, tented type. So if they have everything packed in their trailer and then they pull everything out to put it under a tent, that is a tented vendor. However, if their cooking equipment, refrigeration, that sort of thing is contained within that unit, that would be considered a mobile vendor. We did the same thing as far as trying to define what a mobile vendor was for our bylaws, for our membership requirements, basically. And then as far as the other question,
Zones?
as far as the food truck zones, there are a couple of areas within the downtown Cincinnati area that are managed by event management. So like 3CDC and that sort of thing, who manages Fountain Square, Washington Park, Ziegler Park, and I think now like the Court Street Plaza. So they're the ones that kind of vet the mobile vendors that are utilizing those spaces, and they help to book those. I know as well, the city of Columbus, they also began to kind of implement some mobile vending areas around their city, and they implemented the same application that we use as an association called Street Food Finder in order to have those spots available, and people are able to pull up and book those, and it's for a very minimal fee. It's like $5 or something like that, and that's just so that they can maintain that kind of web and booking system, and so that they know who's where and when, and it kind of helps from a safety factor as well. Unfortunately, we do see sometimes, we haven't seen it that much here in the city of Cincinnati, but in other cities you do see where, I mean, food trucks have quite a bit of cash on us at any given time. So it was also, the reason why the city of Columbus did that was to be able to ensure safety, and so that their city entities knew who was where when, in order to, like you were saying before, to protect that food truck owner and to know where they were in case of an incident or an emergency, that they knew who was booked where when, that they could provide that safety for those vendors. So that is one way to kind of figure out zoning, is utilizing some sort of application that would allow for booking, so you knew who was where when, and give a little bit more detailed information for that. And that actually helps the food truck owner as well, because it's able to be seen in a public view, so people that want to know when are you open and where, it gives people the opportunity to see where they are and what time they're open. As far as downtown food truck zones, they've implemented several different ones. To be really honest with you, they're not always in the best spots for business, so they're not typically utilized as often. However, with the new food truck ordinance, we helped them to write in that food trucks could park in metered parking. They would still have to pay the meter, so if they're taking up 3 meter spaces, they would have to pay the meters during the time that they're there, as long as they're not impeding the flow of traffic, that their service window is facing towards the flow of foot traffic, so not out in the street, but on the sidewalk, which was an issue with one of the spaces downtown, where it was on 5th Street and it was one way, and the majority of food trucks have their service window on the passenger side.
Right.
But that particular space would have had people with their service window on the one-way driving area, and for the truck to park there, they would have to go against the flow of traffic on a one-way street to park there. So lo and behold, that position was eliminated, and that's when they sort of started to allow that meter parking to give a little bit more ease. But then also implementing that you can't be within 100 feet, and if you are, you have to have some written permission from that brick and mortar, and some understanding that you're there, that you're not there to kind of roll over their business, but you're both there doing the same job, so.
Anybody else have questions?
Well, it seems like a lot of common sense stuff that that we easily fit into our. We don't have as much of a downtown area where food trucks are like vying for spots, and we don't have a ton of metered spots either. But everything else seems pretty reasonable. In the model legislation that we're looking at for private property, it says that in this pretend legislation, it's like in any industrial, commercial, or institutional zoning area, which is probably similar to what Cincinnati is.
Sure.
Where it's like, if it's zoned for a restaurant, you can be there. Or if it's zoned for business,
Right.
you can be there.
Understood.
Yeah. Or a residential zone if it's been invited for like a function. So.
Matt, if you don't mind asking, so as far as the question of a private property owner, has there been any issues with the private property owner not wanting a food truck there, or everybody's on board and everybody's good? So
I have requested any complaints that private property owners have filed, and I have yet to receive anything from the building department.
That's what I was going to ask, because as an association, oftentimes folks reach out to us, like, hey, we're having this problem, who do we contact, how do we work, and we've not received any at all. So, and as a matter of fact, just from our own like marketing, and some of the trucks that are in Norwood or that park in Norwood regularly are also members of Cincinnati Food Truck Association. And we see a lot of great feedback from, it being convenient, and they were able to kind of have a one-stop shop, get some gas, run in, get something to eat, and they kind of make it a regular stop. So that's all I was asking, is there a complaint? Because from our end, where we're seeing that it's a pretty positive impact.
I have not heard of any complaints from any individual business owners.
That's a good thing.
And
That's a good thing.
Jeff obviously has not heard anything more official channels. I've asked around, and
Sure.
yeah, there's been, at least for me, no
Yeah,
issues.
that's a good thing. And I would imagine that it would be helpful to those private property owners that they have something additional there that
Oh, yeah.
draws in. And
Love a good taco
I know
truck.
food truck owners, for the most part, everybody keeps it all nice and tidy and clean around their business. So I can imagine that it would, if anything, be a positive impact, or at least I was hoping to hear, so.
Yeah, to my knowledge, we have not heard anything negative from the businesses that host the food trucks or from folks who live near them regarding like mess or volume, anything like that. They're all pretty well received. And the gas stations especially are very happy to have them, so.
Yes, and they're all delicious.
And-
I will not take any sides on which one is the best. That would be rude.
Yeah, that has not been a concern. That is just a question that the city had, is what, just specifically regarding if there was going to be restrictions on zones, for private properties or for commercial properties. I am of the mentality that if a truck has been invited to be there, I don't care what zone it's in, but that's
So,
me.
so currently.
I don't work in the building department.
So
Yeah.
currently, if I were to have a birthday party at my
Right.
house, and I wanted to have, a taco truck come, and park in front of my home, and they're invited for those hours. Right now, under our current legislation, that, we don't have any legislation, is that correct?
Right.
So right now, that would be fine. Okay.
The state
And-
has regulations. and-
Yeah.
And that would be fine under the state regulations.
Right.
Yep.
I think that a truck parking on a residential street without having been invited is not allowed at state level. Like, I don't think that.
It is.
It is?
Because there's no difference between Fifth Street and Elm Street.
I would think because Fifth Street is commercially zoned.
Yeah.
Right, I mean, if you could zone that, but currently, there's nothing stopping a food truck from pulling up in front of a residential house, even if it's uninvited.
That's kind of, to my knowledge, kind of like an ice cream truck that
Yeah.
rolls around with the music on, right? Kind of falls into that
It's very
same
good.
mobile vendor
Yes.
idea. So they're, like I said, to my knowledge, statewide, there's not a mobile food vendor that's impeded from going into a residential area and parking at this moment. Nor is there for someone that's been invited, so long as they're following the proper fire code and health code, that sort of.
And for the city, I know how this works for 3CDC because it's part of my job, but for the city of Cincinnati, if folks want to come vend in the vending zones, even if they're not in a great location, do they have to be on some sort of like, they just do it through Street Food Finder? They don't have to do like a registration with the city or anything specific?
No, I think the only zone that is where there's a time constraint or enforceable is in that like Main Street area
Sure.
bar zone.
That's where all
And-
that bottlenecking was happening.
Correct.
Yeah, by the
And that was
grocery.
where they were a lot more specific as far as hours of operation, how long a specific truck or vehicle could be there. Because they were having some issues with just regular cars, like they pull up their Toyota to hold the spot until, midnight.
There was the
And-
guy with the pickup truck, and he would just set up in the bed of his pickup truck, and he would serve you walking tacos. They were delicious from the bed of his pickup truck, but he would park there all day.
We call that trunk food.
I believe it was trunk food, and I did order it, and it was delicious.
Sometimes that's great.
I have a question. One of the things that I have heard is that there's a concern about the mobility of a mobile truck. And that was one of the things that was being discussed at a previous meeting. And that my understanding is currently, there's an understanding, so maybe not legislated, that our mobile trucks are supposed to move every 30 days.
State
It's a state.
legislation, 40
Okay,
days.
that's the state.
40
Yeah.
days.
Every 40 days. Okay, and I know that some of our, probably all of them do that or have the capacity to do that in Norwood. How is that managed? Is that from a state level? Is that the Board of Health does that? That every time Susan's taco truck, every time I move, who do I tell? How long do I need to be gone for? Can I drive around the block and come back? Do I have to be gone for 24 hours? Is that,
And my question around
And-
that is if the food truck owner has a lease with the property they're on, are they still under that obligation to move, even if they are under like a year-long lease to be on this property?
Right, no, that,
do
I
they
think
have to be
that's,
mobile to be a mobile?
that's a really good
truck?
question, and I think that's where that question comes in, where, like, what constitutes a mobile vendor? Because if you have the capacity to move and you're preferring to be stationary, so then when does that pull you from that idea of mobile vendor? And how are you gonna put that into that language? And if you do have the capacity to move, what would be the understanding or agreement? And I think that would be where kind of like that, legislation or language lies. And like, do you have a lease? Do you have, something that is going to show us that you have some sort of commitment to this location? And then at that point, would that technically mobile vendor then be considered a stationary? And how do you go about that so that it is fair for both the entity that is leasing or renting that space as well as the leasee?
But right now at the state level, I mean, you're supposed to move every 40
Sure.
days, but
I feel like
who
this
regulates that?
I'm not sure who would be the one regulated except for that particular municipality. So that they would be the ones that would be essentially policing that spot. Now, as far as how long they have to be out of that spot, every 30 or 40 days, that I would not be able to tell you if they need to drive around the block, or do they need to go to another event, or be gone for 24 hours. That I don't believe, I don't know of, I shouldn't say I don't believe, I don't know of any specifics as far as how to.
Do you know how they're handling it in Cincinnati?
That I'm not sure. As far as City of Cincinnati, a lot of what we worked on with that ordinance was very much like downtown based. And for the most part, there wasn't anyone that was staying there or looking to stay there. It was the problem of they were just popping up in very inopportune times. So I think it was kind of the opposite of kind
Different.
of what you're looking at here.
If I can chime in on that. So to get your health department license, you can either get a mobile operation, or like a brick and mortar, or it's like a food prep thing where you can prep in a tent or something like that. The state health department says that to get a mobile food license, you have to be able to move every 40 days. The health codes are almost identical for a mobile operation and for a brick and mortar. The only difference is they question all kinds of water supply and water drainage issues in the mobile, thing, where they don't, they require grease trap issues in brick and mortar. So from what I understand, our health department our health department approached food vendor or mobile vendors a while ago and said, you have to move every 40 days. But the health department gave no guidance as to how to report when you move every 40 days. So the gentlemen back here have been told they have to move, but there's no checks and balances for them to say, I reported once every 35 days, I reported once. So they're,
And I know a lot of the truck owners have been like self-reporting, like calling the Board of Health and saying, hey, I own this truck and and I'm moving. But I doubt that that's being
Well, I actually
tracked
called
or
the Board of
logged
Health
or-
and they said, we're not getting any calls, which maybe they are, but, my point is, there's nowhere to write it down.
They don't have
So
any kind of
there's no,
tracking system.
whether it happens or it doesn't happen, we have no,
so is it important to them if they're not tracking?
I am under the impression that
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 is a
40
good
days
question.
is based on complaints only. I think that is similar to like code enforcement, where no one's going around the city and measuring people's grass to make sure it's not above a certain height, but if someone calls and complains, they send
That's
someone
when they-
out. So I'm under the impression that this is a similar thing, where unless someone calls and says, this food truck hasn't moved in a month or 2 months or whatever,
Yeah.
there is not someone who is like personally in
Yeah.
charge of.
And I could see a hypothetical situation where like there's a trailer and all the wheels are busted out. It's clearly not actually
Sure.
mobile right now.
Sure.
And then that would be another issue. But yeah, it seems like if no one's statewide is collecting this information,
Right.
it seems like with our other things, it should just be complaint based. If it has become a problem for some reason, then we start to look at that. Otherwise, it seems like such a kind of an onerous thing to.
And Jeff, you said it has the capacity to move.
The
Which-
code says it's a mobile operation that does or can move regularly.
So
The
that
code
doesn't
does
mean
not-
it is moving.
Yeah.
So,
But then there is the additional piece about the 40 days, so.
Yeah.
But that's just for your health
Right.
certificate. That's
Right.
not the code for the state.
And my which
I'm
this
sorry,
is-
that didn't make sense to me. Can you say that again?
So the 40-day rule
Yeah.
is to get your health department certification. And
So
that
every
comes from-
40 days you have to get a health department? No, okay.
The 40-day you have to move is to get your health department certification.
So you're just saying, yes, I will move at least once every 40 days.
In essence,
And I
you're just.
imagine like as far as like the statewide goes,
Candace is also on city council, and she
Hi.
started the food truck conversation a couple years ago.
I worry about it only being a complaint situation. If it's not being tracked, people can target individual
Sure.
food trucks.
There should be some sort of system
There
to
should be
say,
some, like,
they called me 3 days ago that they moved, so you can't claim that they aren't moving.
so you
They
can't,
moved
you don't
3
have
days ago.
any means to complain because we have this.
Right.
Or
But if
it
they're also
starts at that
asking
day. I call and
for-
complain about Susie's taco truck, and then they're
Now
like, okay,
Susie
so
has
now it's
40 days.
starting today would be day 1 of 40.
That's the way it would currently work.
Yeah, and that's how the way it would work for like an abandoned car too.
Sure.
So would that help with the complaint base, or?
If they actually track it. You know,
But
like-
they would have to then track it as of day 1 of complaint,
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, I think,
right?
Because there wouldn't be proof
That-
that,
right.
there wouldn't be proof except for that initial complaint
right.
of someone.
And that's,
And I'm
that's
just-
how all
yeah.
code enforcement works. So
Yeah.
that's the same, that's no different than, yeah, there's an abandoned vehicle. They don't say, oh, well, you told me it was here for 30 days, so I'm gonna ticket
Yeah.
them. It's 30 days from the date of complaint.
Yeah.
And I-
So the Board of Health has a system set up for that, which,
They do not.
yeah, so.
But at the same time, you guys are food, hello. You guys are food truck owners and you're contacting and saying, I'm moving, or, you're not there, and they're not recording that, then, it's my word against your
I
word.
have
Yeah.
a law, I have a logbook every time, since last year, since they did this. Right? Since they helped, he's no longer with the health department anymore. The guy that came around all over food trucks said this. We started documenting, what Lisa just said, we started documenting, so what we do every single time is that we call the health department. I don't care if I'm moving that truck just to go to GFS and go get a loaf of bread. We call the health department and say, hey, listen, this is NHC states, we're moving our unit, okay? The ordinance, the ORC doesn't say how long we have to move, doesn't say how far we got to move, doesn't say inches, feet, doesn't say anything in the ORC.
That's okay, I don't think it has any specifics.
It doesn't specify that. It hasn't been an issue in any municipality, until now, right? But however, what we do, and I make sure that I go to these guys, every last food truck is sitting on, when I say, hey, listen, you can move the truck, I know how long the trucks are sitting down there, because we down every day, right? Hey, move your truck, call the health department, let them know that you're moving your truck. It doesn't matter, you could take the truck from the BP to Kroger's.
I mean, in theory, you could just start it up, roll it 5
Yeah.
feet forward and roll it 5 feet back.
Since there's no
And
that's-
specifics in the state code,
Is
right?
to establish that these trucks are in fact mobile, and that they have the ability to move, and that they can use. So there's an establishment as a regular regular sit down place, like they do. But what I can guarantee you that these trucks, at least I can speak for me and a few of the other ones, we call the health department every 6 times. I have a log, date, time, everything. I even have camera evidence on my cameras where we see.
Well, and the other thing, and I don't disagree with that, but when we're having some conversations about chronic nuisance with there's a piece about proof. And if I were Susie's taco truck, why would I call in and say that I'm moving if it's not being logged, if it's not being tracked?
It also seems like we're really asking a lot. I cannot think of another business that we're asking to call
report
and
in every 40
self-report
days.
that they are following state statutes. Like
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
seems like excessive.
Above and beyond, like, I'm
yes.
not calling every time, I don't know, put my seatbelt on in my car, right, and I'm following an ordinance, I'm not gonna call the police, like, hey, police officer, I'm putting my seatbelt on now, like,
Yeah.
I'm reporting, it's kind of the same idea, like, hey, I'm following the rules, it seems pretty,
Sure.
So it's.
What were you saying?
Oh, sorry.
No, as to say, I tried to call it a couple times, and one time they answered, 2 times that I was in the line for like 5-7 minutes. and
Yeah.
We got things to do, and
Oh, yeah.
they asked for a lot of things for the food truck, even like the health stuff, with the Cincinnati, the plan with the Norwood.
Yeah,
Also,
and
so
I will
instead
say-
of one
Now you
check,
have
then
5
we went to the 2 times. If we normally we have to take it to the health department in Cincinnati, so everybody knows that we have to move it actually on trucks to go there, because they cannot come here with some reason, I mean.
Sure.
So if I, with my little food truck that I have in my head, I need to have both a Cincinnati food license and a Norwood one, is
If
that
you-
correct?
If you're operating Norwood.
Okay, if I'm only operating in Norwood, do I have to have both, or do I just have the Norwood one?
so typically a mobile food license will allow you to, so for example, my food truck business, we are, in like Blue Ash, Hamilton County, so we're inspected by Hamilton County. And that mobile license is good throughout any jurisdiction. If we are in Norwood, if we are in downtown Cincinnati, if we are in Lebanon, Mason,
It's
as long
just
as we're
so
showing that.
specific.
So
Right.
why
Correct.
does the Hamilton County Board of Health not count in Norwood?
It does.
It does.
I can take my license that I got from
Yeah.
Norwood, I can operate in Columbus. I can go
Okay,
to-
so you're
Yeah.
not getting,
They're
you're
just
not
state
needing,
specific.
No,
right?
I'm
If
not
you're not
restricted. You don't
Correct.
need two
licensed in
licenses.
Kentucky.
You're
Okay.
regulated by
okay,
whatever health department, whatever municipality you're in, say in Norwood, right?
Wherever your business is
Yeah.
registered.
The
Okay.
health department from Hamilton County can come down and inspect these trucks anytime. We can't tell them no, and they have the ability to shut us down. So those licenses are not just stationary in one particular city.
got it.
I can go throughout the entire state of Ohio now.
We can't go to Kentucky. We
Yeah.
have to have
Yeah,
a
you
different license.
licensed
They're
in-
not transferable
But
via
you
state.
could be licensed in Ohio
And
and
Kentucky.
Kentucky.
You could be
and
licensed in
Indiana
both,
if you
yes.
wanted to.
Yeah.
And what I will say is, it's important to note in this conversation, as far as I am aware last, and you might know more recently than I, Norwood's Board of Health does not do health inspections. They are contracted through Cincinnati or through Hamilton County.
They
There was a
did
brief window where
previously.
Norwood had a health
I
inspector.
believe they did
They
previously.
have one now. Now, I'm
Oh,
gonna
is there
tell you
one
what
again?
happened.
Okay.
So, we had just been inspected by, we had Taste of Cincinnati. It was coming up. I think, trust me, it's heavily inspected by
Every day.
every day, okay? I guess the new guy that they hired for Norwood, he doesn't go to anybody else's truck, he comes to mine. He goes, hey, can I inspect your truck? I go, yeah, go, I guess, right? For some reason, he found the littlest thing, like I didn't have a thermometer in one of my refrigerators. It's not gonna, kill everybody in the world, but, and he said, well, I need you to have this, and this. Fine, we'll have it. The problem was that he never came back. I had to self-police, I went to him and said, hey, listen, you asked for this stuff about 2 months ago, you haven't come back. Usually they come back within 30 days, all right? But no, I can, if I go to Blue Ash, they can come in, for an event, they can come inspect it. Say if Candace is doing something at the site, right? And she wants to have 3 or 4 trucks on that thing, but she has to get a permit, and then Norwood can come and say, we need to inspect you before you can operate. Doesn't mean that your license isn't valid, It just means that you have to pass those little checks and balances.
Sure.
before you can
And there are
operate.
some municipalities that'll just say like, okay, you have your mobile license and they have the ability, excuse me, to communicate with that particular, health department to say like, okay, have they had any dings? Have they been shut down or anything in the past? However, but 9 times out of 10, they'll just kind of do a quick check, I believe. But more often, if you show, you know, whatever your license is, when we're booked for events and that sort of thing, event coordinators ask for, you know, can I get a copy of your mobile license so that they can check it if they need to, that sort of thing. But, like Ty was saying, our license is out of Hamilton County. We can then get booked in Norwood for something, we have the ability, we don't have to check in with health department, we don't have to notify Norwood Health Department or City of Cincinnati that we're here. A lot of, since the fire code in Ohio was written, was it 6 years ago now, 5 years ago? Oftentimes, a fire jurisdiction will want to inspect at that event, even though you're already permitted and inspected and you've got your fire permit for that, for whatever jurisdiction. They'll still want to just double check, to make sure you still have the same extinguishers that you're supposed to have, that you still have your, you know, CO2 monitored, that sort of thing. Because a lot of people will get inspected, their initial annual inspection have everything that they need, but then it gets to be the busy food truck season and they don't have, they took their fire extinguisher off to scrub their truck and didn't put it back or whatever. So oftentimes that's why trucks will get re-inspected at events, or if they pulled up, I mean, health department, fire department, they can come and inspect us at any time. So, that's where those kind of like re-inspections come in, but it's not like not necessarily a check-in thing. There's a large event, oftentimes that event organizer will contact the health department and say, hey, we're gonna have 10 trucks at this event, just wanted to let you know. And then it's up to that health department or jurisdiction, if they want to go and inspect all 10 of those trucks for that event, they can, but we're not, we don't have to wait to open our window to vend. We don't have to wait for health department for that, unless we're pulling a temporary permit. If we don't have an annual mobile license, then yes, you cannot open your window until that health department inspector has come and inspected, make sure that you're good for that temporary moment. That's kind of how those work.
Do we currently have the 3 different vendor types that are in the sample legislation you sent us? Vendor 1 is prepackaged food, 2 is like limited, and 3 is like where you do everything, prepares, cooks, and holds food. That's a little different than when you're talking about like the hot dog truck.
So I know Hamilton County Health Department has already implemented different language for different types of vending and kind of like a different tier structure as far as kind of how they inspect and the cost of that licensing for that type of food. And also, if it is prepackaged, where are they getting it prepackaged? If they prepackage it themselves, do they have a commissary prep location where they do that? For example, like one example, that are street pops, popsicles, they're all handmade popsicles. She has a specific commissary that she works out of, which is also inspected by county inspectors. In order to kind of fall in that line. So there's, with each one of those tiers, there's specific language as to what you have to comply with and how those units are inspected annually, as well as in that moment, and what they have to show upon being inspected without notice.
So, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm still questioning the problem that we're trying to solve
We are
with
trying to
legislation.
ensure that there is some sort of long-term protection for the food trucks so that in 2 years, my concern is that if we say the proposed ordinance is not what we want, we're voting it down, we're done with the conversation, that in 2 years, someone else is going to propose something similar and the food trucks will again be trying to defend their livelihood and like, no, you guys don't do this again to us. And so I'm trying to put something in place to ensure that this legislation exists so that they have some sort of long-term plan, protection, plan of action.
And we have legislation
And
on
we
it.
have legislation around it.
I get that. But as Amy said, the problem was, Cincinnati was trying to figure out was impeding traffic and things like that. we have not defined the problem in Norwood, other than wanting to protect for future.
The problem is that there is no legislation, and so the potential exists for someone to try to shoot down food trucks operating in the city again.
Yeah.
So then, the only thing is, we need to have legislation that says, this is what a food truck is, and this is where it's allowed to operate.
Yes.
And like, do they need to move, and what does moving mean, and,
Well, see, we can't do
Because-
that,
Or
'cause
we can
that's
just
a-
defer to the
that's
state.
above us.
I'm
Yeah.
of the mentality, and this is a question I think probably for our law director. I am of the mentality, yes, a mobile food vendor should be mobile. And if we have concerns about one's mobility, we should be able to have code enforcement come out and say, can you move your vehicle for me to prove that it's mobile? And then they move their vehicle, and that is a mobile vehicle, and that's done.
Yay.
And my question is, can our legislation supersede the 40-day rule if we have proof of a lease? If a food vendor has a year-long lease at a business,
they would still have
can we
to.
not say, this is a separate situation than a street vendor because they have permission from the property
Yeah,
owner to be here?
that
for
sounds like
X
a
amount of
a
time?
law
feels
director
like-
problem.
So that's just a question for the law director.
I have a legal background, and I would
You're like,
refer to the law director,
I wrote
because
ask
I do
Keith,
know, like, any state code is like enforceable in the smaller jurisdictions. You can add to it, but you cannot detract from it. So by changing that 40-day rule, how would you go about, would that be considered adding to it or subtracting?
Yes,
And if it's
could it be-
subtracting, then,
Yeah, what if it's
so
adding?
it'll be interesting
What if
how to
it wouldn't
form
be
that
necessarily
argument.
subtracting, but it would be saying, how are we,
In this circumstance, in this
how are we,
instance.
right.
So like making an
This
addition.
literally came up because of the zoning, central business district, private property, when it was written decades ago. They didn't want anyone selling anything in a parking lot. So it says no peddling, no selling of this. In that zoning, if you have a license, you can sell here.
So it seems
So-
similar that like that's not taking away, no selling of goods here unless you have a license
Yeah.
means you're not
So,
taking
like,
away
yeah.
from that
But that's-
legislation.
I mean, that's
Well,
where they're coming from.
circumstantial.
So
Yeah.
We don't want anyone selling anything here decades ago.
Sure.
We don't want peddlers.
So this feels like you have to move every 40 days unless you are underneath of operating.
Well,
under-
but I
That's
think-
That's the health.
Yeah.
That's the board of health. That is
Yeah.
not-
I think the peddling
Administration.
is different, because.
Well, that's why, yeah.
Yeah,
City
so
of
back
Cincinnati
in.
has that similar, like, that they, where they differentiate what is a mobile vendor and what constitutes like a peddler's license.
Right,
So,
'cause I-
yeah,
what-
so maybe defining
So
that.
like you're saying, like, all we have to do is add something in that section saying, hey,
And peddling applies to like
illegal,
goods.
yeah.
It applies to like.
Well,
I'm
they
here
were
selling
having, we were
jewelry, I'm
having
here
those
selling-
issues of folks coming in and putting up with the teddy bears and,
Sure.
and things that we might not consider a value add to the community. I think most folks feel like the food trucks are a value add to our community. And so how can we make sure that if it's in the parking lot of a business and they have a lease, that it's still a business that we would consider a value add, i.e. a food truck, rather than a peddler?
Would you
which
be able to
would-
put in language that does kind of like define what is a mobile vendor, like a mobile?
Yes.
Because,
Yeah.
like I
And the
said, that's
safety
kind of
service
how
director
we
would like for us to do
define
that.
what a mobile vendor was for our association
Yeah.
and what constitutes for our membership requirements, whether it was contained or not contained, whether it had 2 axles or 1 or 4, you know, like whatever that vehicle type is defined in what we constitute would meet our membership requirements. It's constituted as a food trailer or food truck. And that helped for us to be able to define membership. Because, I mean, we're a food truck association, but there's also people that work as tented food vendors as well. We're like, well, it doesn't, how do we define that? How do we put that into writing or put that into that language so we can better define what our membership is made up of? So maybe adding that type of language into the legislations about what constitutes a mobile vendor versus a peddler, if you will, would kind of then like help to add to whatever that is, so that it's not a subtraction and it is an addition to that state code. You know, does that make sense?
What is in the verbiage, not the state code, but in Norwood, particular codes, right? It says, it defines it as open sales. So it makes it impermissible to do open sales, right? As in, like Susan was talking about, So for instance, I'm gonna give you an example of those open sales. Remember when the Bengals went to the AFC, NFC
Right.
championship game, and they were actually playing in the Super Bowl? So if you guys remember we would see almost every day, especially with the BP where I'm at, right? With the guy who's had like.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
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 And he
Yeah,
had
those
all
were
the
all
t-shirts.
Oh, yeah.
And jerseys.
Yes, that's considered open sales. That's the verbiage that's in the Norwood, I'm busy today, but, it's 8 something, but it says, particularly defines that as open sales. So they could have a guy like Susan said, come on the corner and sell roses out of a bucket on the corner, or prevents from somebody from just setting up a table in a tent and selling sandwiches out of there. So that's what Norwood defines as open sales. Now, again, that's what the law director can better add.
I'm sorry, open sales?
Yes, open sales.
Thank you.
It defines it as open sales.
And I think that sounds like similar to what City of Cincinnati defines as like a peddler or pet, and you have to get a peddler's license. Whereas with a mobile vendor, you don't have to get a mobile license through the city. You just have to have your health department permit.
Yeah.
It's not anything additional. It's not an additional operating permit or anything like that. The people that need to get that additional are those open sales, or what the city of Cincinnati defines as peddler, which kind of makes sense. You know, at least you have some sort of definition of what they're doing and where they're not just popping up and selling their bucket of roses.
And I think in the city of Cincinnati, and I could be wrong about this, but from what I know about it, people with peddler's license can peddle in any commercial zone in any space, so long as they're not blocking a certain percentage of sidewalk and a certain percentage of street. So like the folks who just set up their hot dog cart on a corner, they're totally allowed to do that. And when there's like Cincy Music Festival, you'll see people like do pop-up tents where they're selling outfits or whatever. And as long as they're not blocking I think it's 50% or something like that of the sidewalk, they're allowed to do that in a commercial zone. So
I believe they do have to register with the city
they
for
have
that
to,
peddler's
yes.
license.
Yeah, they have to have the peddler's license, but
Yeah.
once they have that, they
Yeah,
can be,
there-
there is few
there's no-
restriction in
there's
the
not as much
commercial area.
definition once they
Yeah,
have
where
it.
they can do that. So the cities, when I talked to Noah today, the goal that the city has is for us to like have some tangible legislation moving forward. My thoughts on what should be included in that legislation right now, what I would like to see, and you all can say absolutely not, Sam, that's stupid, or whatever. I am of the opinion that if a food truck is licensed to operate within the state of Ohio, I feel they should be able to operate in any commercial zones. Without like a day permit or annual permit with Norwood or any kind of thing. If they're licensed through the state in whatever county, it makes sense to me that they should be able to operate in commercial zones, either at a metered spot, or if we wanted to have designated food truck parking. I know that was something that Candace was looking at a couple years ago, was having like some designated spots for food trucks. And then on private property, either with a lease or by invitation. I think people's private property is their private property, and if they want to have a food truck on it, that is their prerogative to do.
Well, if they don't want it,
So-
they can.
Yeah, they
call and
can
get them
call and get
trespassed.
rid of it, yes.
So with that, back to my birthday party, and I'm getting the taco truck. I'm planning ahead, let's be clear. My home is not in a commercial zone,
Right.
Sure.
but they're invited, but they're parking on the street.
And that is gonna be something we run into because a lot of Norwood does not have off-street parking. So.
So it would
whether
have
there
to be
is-
in my driveway.
And if you didn't have a driveway, is your option just not having a food truck, or are we interested in doing some sort of time window, like
Yep.
between these hours, 3 to
I
4
was
hours?
just gonna say, 3 to
Yeah.
4 hours is
I'm sorry,
usually.
is that currently the rule?
Yes.
Oh, so I can currently do this?
Yes.
Yeah, because you can, they had it at Porch Fest, they had El Vaquero there. As long as it's invited, and it's like, this is an
You can
event
be
that is
there for 3
happening.
hours.
Yeah, 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah, it was great.
If
Can
you want
I-
to go into the driveway, then, you know.
Oh, yeah.
That's
it's-
allowed as
Then you
well.
can have your
Well,
taco
if you
truck at your
That's
birthday
your
all night.
driveway, yeah. and you can-
But if you have it, what's going on?
Are there things, as we're having this conversation and you folks are listening, and this is your job, you know it certainly better than I do in my little taco truck in my head. What are the things that are the most important to you that would be in the ordinance.
I think just like she said, it's just a protection of the food trucks. So for instance, if you guys are not here, because I want to make this abundantly clear to these guys that are watching, and so that they understand. Everybody, nobody here is like trying to get rid of the food truck again in this room. Everybody's trying to come up with a solution of how to protect the current ones. I just want to make that abundantly clear with everybody that's up in this room. But I just think it's being allowed. I mean, if that business owner says it, right, then I don't understand why it should not be allowed. I can bring in numbers.
Yeah.
The fact that because we sit down there, how much that guy's numbers have improved as a business owner of having us down there, and how the director of the regional director of BP, loves that idea and wish he could have it in almost every last one. I just think the protection of just being able to say, hey, listen, let's put a system in place where, okay, if that's the thing about moving 40 days, let's put some type of system in place to document the trucks can call and move, and they have to document and say, hey, we're moving every 40 days, because that seems to be the issue right now, one of the issues right now, from my understanding, not from you guys.
Well, I'm curious, who is the issue come from?
Victor's not here. I mean,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I am not
guess.
interested in continuing any process of you all having to call and self-report. That feels very
That
excessive.
feels silly
We aren't
to me.
asking
Yeah.
you to any
Yeah,
other-
I was
yeah.
just going to say that from
Yeah.
an advocacy standpoint, that
Yeah, that
having
just
to like
seems
self-report,
No
like I said,
wacko.
I'm not calling the
Municipalities
police every
are
time I put my
asking for
seatbelt
that.
on.
Yeah, you're
so-
supposed
Yeah.
to move my car in front of my house we just changed it, every 72
3
hours?
days, yeah.
I don't call and say,
That's-
I'm moving my car.
That, I don't have to call and tell anyone I moved my
Yeah.
car.
I think-
And I don't need to prove it until it's been 72 hours and the police come and they mark the ground, not the tire, the ground.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's appropriate for,
Yeah.
and also, we don't have the staffing.
Yeah.
Seriously, we
Yeah.
don't
Not
have the staffing.
infrastructure to support that kind of monitoring.
Yeah, and for me, like, I think my primary concern is just making sure that we get mobile food vendors out of any sort of legal gray area and make it an established thing where this is a thing, it exists, everything is fine, we're following all the state laws, there's no question of, oh, is it a peddler, what is going on here? That's my priority for any legislation that we put on.
So,
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it feels like we're all on the same page and we're ready to move forward with, I would love to see
Specific language, yeah.
some language that we can all take a look at. I would love for you guys to take a look at it. One thing I know that I brought to council was the fact that it's, the food truck information is in English, and the majority of our food truck owners are English as a second language. And I want to make sure that you are fully aware of all the information and that, and I would like to look at the possibility of having it in Spanish as well. I'm still waiting.
So-
Oh,
so Amy is a translator. Amy is a
Yeah.
former translator.
yeah.
She's a
Oh,
translator
well, I was
for
gonna
the
say,
state.
I've got
Not
a
to the-
bid
well, I
for
actually
part of
just
it, and
started
it
at
can
Immigrant
be.
Refugee Law
Gotcha.
Center 3
Yeah.
weeks ago.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but prior to that, I was an interpreter for Hamilton County Courts, contracted.
Oh, cool,
So,
fantastic.
honestly, it would not be difficult at all. It's what I do on a daily basis.
Okay,
I work
well,
in
I
an immigration
got-
law office, so I translate documents all day.
Fantastic. I
So
did get
if-
an
I'd
estimate
be
for
more than
everything
happy.
except the food truck ordinance. So I would love for us to pull that in, because I think in particular, I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's the
It's
only
important.
business in Norwood that is that dominated by
Spanish speaking.
by Spanish people folks.
Because everybody loves a taco truck.
Everybody
Sorry.
loves a taco
Everybody
truck.
does.
Yes.
Everybody loves a taco
And
truck,
so I
man.
want to make sure that we're paying attention to that.
Sure.
Yeah, Susan's talking.
Yeah, and I'll also, you are in no fear of losing business to Susan's
Well,
Taco
and
Truck.
from the Food Truck Association point of view, I'm more than happy I can email our language about how we define what a mobile vendor is for our association. Not to say that needs to be your language,
No,
but
but I
that would
wrote
be
down,
a little bit of.
check what CFTA
Yeah.
qualifies a mobile food
There's
truck.
no reason to reinvent the
Recreate it,
wheel.
yes.
Yeah. Right.
That is
So
our
if you
most
can just
used
kind of
phrase
like-
in these chambers,
I know.
by the way.
Yes, it
No
is.
use reinventing the wheel.
Yeah.
Steal from
Let's
someone
look
else.
it up.
Steal from someone else.
So
No,
is
that-
it possible to put in some type of language that says, okay, the current trucks that have been here, right? Or that have been here, so most of us have been here, like, I've been here, I've been here
Years.
6 years now, years. Now, I've been living in Norwood going on 15. That we can be grandfathered in, if there's any kind of new trucks that are, you know, wanna come in that, because I can see there's been a problem down the line, if something is not written up to protect the current trucks that are.
So what are you saying? So let's say we have this new legislation and I'm starting my taco truck.
Yeah.
It needs to be something different, but what's the concern? That I'm gonna pull up across the street? or-
It's
So
food
what's the,
trucks.
pro-
No. We're
so what's
used to
the-
having 20 trucks around.
so what's the protection that current folks need from potential new folks?
I think just the zoning, in terms of protecting the food trucks, and saying that we are allowed to operate in this particular zone, on these particular, you know, on, if it's okay with if it's okay with the property owner, that it's okay. Now, of course, we can't operate in residential, we can only do it in commercial. However, if there's some type of protection that just says, hey, this, you know, this is.
You're talking about
the-
like zoning protection?
Yes, some zoning protections.
What would that, I guess I'm looking for the example, the concrete example.
I don't
Is-
think that we are planning on any zoning restrictions.
Yeah, you said one.
Yeah, you said in commercial.
Well, commercial zones and then in residential zones with, on invitation.
Yeah.
Yeah, public streets.
And I think we're all trying to come up with the right type of language
Sure.
to.
And I am not a lawyer, so don't hold me to any of it. It's all
So that someone can't find one of those loopholes to.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's prudent that, I mean, I don't think we'll necessarily find the language tonight, but I think if some of us would think of it, you know, with, you know, before the year is over with. I mean, I have everybody's numbers up in here, so.
Yeah.
you know, So, and I think Jeff does too. We got it now. But I think if we can collectively just come up with some different languages and brainstorm. It's not gonna come to you in here. It might come to you when you're driving down the
Yeah.
street. It might come to you
So
when you.
why don't, it seems like let's get some sample legislation, you guys take a look at it. I don't know that we could have the sample stuff in Spanish that quickly.
Well, so what I
But-
can do tonight is send kind of our building blocks for some potential legislation over to our law department. See if they can in the next month work something up that is a potential ordinance. And then we can all kind of review it together, and see if there are things we feel need changed or added or taken away, and kind of go from there.
Does that sound good?
I think what he was trying to say is like, so basically, not get overwhelmed with more food trucks that come in, like, you know, the stuff you guys were talking about, the traffic, you know, we don't want that to be an issue.
So if we say food trucks, Norwood's open, you're worried that there's gonna be this huge
And then it
influx?
becomes that traffic, that, you know, that's what he's saying.
And there's that bottlenecking, and then they're gonna come back to the drawing board. and
Right.
Now we're gonna do this again.
Exactly.
So the
That's what he's
challenge
saying,
is, are we concerned that we're gonna have, instead of 10 food trucks, we're gonna end up with 50 food trucks?
Right, yeah, so that's what he's saying, like.
So like, for example, like
Gotcha.
for me and these guys, we've all been here for years. It's not like we, you know.
Yeah.
And actually.
You've paid your
most of us-
dues.
Yeah, we all live in, Norwood. We all live in Norwood too, so we pay taxes in Norwood, we do everything, you know. So for us, it's just about being able to protect the businesses that's in the community that we live in, but yet not have the city overwhelmed with.
So what if we consider doing designated, not zone as in like building zoning,
Yeah.
but zones as in like from, on this block of Montgomery Road?
Yeah,
you can
yeah,
park-
yeah.
Instead of saying in any commercially zoned space, have designated areas where they can park. That way we can only have a maximum. Now, we can't stop private business owners.
Yeah, right,
Every
yeah.
gas station wants
If
to have a food
If
truck.
Brickmore don't want you in that parking lot in Kroger's, you're not going in that parking lot.
Right.
You don't have to have the city or anybody.
But in terms of public streets,
Public,
we
yeah.
could have designated areas where a food truck could park.
I think-
That might be helpful
Oh.
for law enforcement,
Sure.
because they're the ones like, you know, that are patrolling those streets. and
Yeah.
see where they're supposed to be.
And I know what you're gonna say, teacher.
Yeah, I was gonna say, just,
What's he gonna say? I don't know.
what if we just said, food trucks are permitted in commercial zones, and if they want to park on the street, they have to get a permit from the SSD? It seems like that would solve a lot of what we've talked about tonight.
Sure, I would
And the
just
permit
need,
could have a time limit on it.
I would say that we would probably need to have some sort of guideline about like a maximum amount of permits issued for one window. Like we couldn't issue 50 permits for the same 3-hour gap of the same day. So that
The
we don't have
SSD wouldn't do that.
Well, but we would have to, we couldn't leave that up to him to say.
Because
"No,
how
I've
would he
issued
be
enough."
able to
There would
That's
need to be
track?
an
exactly how
SOP.
this is worded.
Well, we don't have to use this exactly the way.
I know,
it's
but I'm saying we could do
Yeah.
that.
It seems arbitrary for NOAA to have to determine how many is too many is all I mean. So we should say a maximum of 10 could be issued for any given moment so that NOAA doesn't have to decide, is 4 food trucks at one time in the city too much, or is 8 too many, or is 10 too many? We would just probably need to set a number of how many is the maximum amount of permits issued at one moment for public
But does that
parking.
protect the ones that are here? Because he can say, well, okay,
Oh.
these guys, these, you know, currently right now, there's about seven, 8 of us, right? These guys got theirs for the year 2000 into 2025. Then once that 2025 gets here, March 1st, then, you know, it gives somebody the ability to say, okay, well, you guys have had that one for a year, then we can bring this one. I can see how that loophole can be.
I think what Jeff's saying is if you wanna park in a public parking space in a commercial zone,
Yeah.
you have to take a permit out for that day. From
Otherwise,
the-
you would be-
From the safety service director.
What I'm trying to say is, what you're currently doing, we could say is legal.
Oh, okay.
If you're in a commercial zone,
Yeah.
you're allowed to park there with the permission of whoever owns that private property.
it
But if
doesn't
we wanted to go
Yeah,
to
yeah.
any other parking spot, I mean, if we wanted to have, you know, Susie's Food Trucks for a birthday, call the SSD, get
And
a
ask for a
permit.
permit for that day.
And so my thoughts are, we
Yeah.
would need to set a maximum amount of public spot permits that we would issue at any given moment, so that it wouldn't be up to the safety service director to say how many is too many, so that we don't have a day where 50 people take out parking
Yeah.
permits for trucks.
Right.
And we've got 50 trucks on Montgomery Road.
And then that becomes a traffic issue.
Right.
Yeah.
We get first dibs.
Or what if,
I mean, as long as it protects the current ones that are here.
Yeah.
That's my concern.
Yeah.
It's just, as long as it protects it. I mean, it's pretty much like, I'm gonna give you an example, today. Right? We had one of the bagel places come down to get food. And he's like, man, this is convenient. When he says like, it's just, I know it's in Norwood. I know you in Norwood. They know we're there because we've been there. We've been
Right.
stationary there for, 6 years now. And so, everybody knows that like where AJ's cheesesteaks is. Everybody knows where, the next village truck is. Everybody, the people that have been frequenting this particular area. Even when you pull it up on Google Maps, or you pull it up on places to eat in Norwood, what's crazy is that all of our businesses come up with the businesses that's, the brick and mortar businesses that are already there. So I don't know. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about no more, but.
is everybody here currently having their truck on private property?
Yes.
Okay.
So this
So
day
that
permit
would just
is
be
not
between
part of
you and BP, or you and Shell.
Yeah.
So if
Okay.
you fell out with BP, or if Susie's Taco Truck comes in and my food's better,
Right. And then my lease agreement with him is, we of course we pay on him and pay for trash, but we also, our responsibility within our lease down there at BP is that we maintain a clean, safe environment. And so I put that up in there so that it helps the other businesses that are particularly, there was verbiage that I put up in the lease, and I told them to put up in the lease, so that we don't have that $1,000 trucks coming in, messes and just stuff everywhere. So, like I say, I just want to make sure that, our business, I don't want to leave Norwood, personally, I don't want to leave Norwood, because, I live here. I public works here, community stuff, we all do that here, so I don't really want to leave Norwood, because
Sounds like we don't need to.
That's what I was just gonna
Yeah,
say.
we're working
Sounds
on
like
it.
they're-
And this
sounds
is a
like they're
really,
doing their
this
due
is a really
diligence to make sure you
collaborative
stay.
group. And I think that we're gonna be able to figure out stuff that's gonna work. I feel very confident in that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
It's not, and the other thing about legislation is it's meant to be shifted and adjusted and perfected.
Yeah.
So I think that's our task, is to
Yeah,
yeah,
try
change
to mold
it.
that together.
We've got an initial thing. Yeah, sorry, go
it's okay.
Jeff. I don't have anything
To
good.
the operator owners, what percentage of your business is done on in a parking space on a public street in Norwood?
less than 10%, I can speak at right now. Because if you look at this, if you look at the way Norwood is situated, right, the corridor, right, cars are whizzing by there all the time. It's literally, remember when we used to have the food trucks in front of City Hall? And I can't even tell you how much, it was dangerous when people just try to cross and they whiz it by. So it's, and the ORC says that we operate on public streets, here in Norwood. But to me, I think that's dangerous with this corridor here. I think it's very dangerous, and I know years ago, I don't know, I can't remember, Susan, I know it was me, Emily, remember we were all on the board for to redo the corridor of Norwood, we were on that council, and we talked about that, we talked about how dangerous it is.
Yeah, it's so wide.
Yeah.
It's too wide.
Yeah.
It's like a
so
river.
But it's
Yeah.
less than 10%, I can tell you what, it's less than 10%. If you look at the way, most of the way these trucks are, they can get in, like for us, they can make a right-hand turn. Very seldom do somebody make a left-hand turn coming to the BP. Very seldom. If you come off the lateral, or they come in, they make a right-hand turn. Very seldom. When they turn into his, he has a whole gigantic parking lot. Again, he's making right-hand turns to go one way, right-hand turns to go another way, and he has a right to go left the other way. It's the same, it's the same with him. You have to, it's a safety, all of our positions are safety here in Norwood, to be honest with you.
And you're all in parking in different
Yes.
parking lots, different lots, right, you're not on the street.
If
I'm
he owns
he
it,
also.
so how do you regulate him? He owns the building, he owns the property, he owns the land.
Yeah.
He owns
You-
where his food truck sits and his
Yep.
ice cream shop sits, he owns that. So how do we
Yeah, you
regulate
shouldn't.
his property that he reinvested in Norwood, fix it up, clean
Yep.
it up, family business now?
and that ice cream is delicious.
And it's a beautiful space.
Yeah.
I need to get some ice cream. Yep.
All right, so do we want to schedule another meeting, or?
Yes, so here's what we'll do. Next steps, I'm gonna send over just some points that we'd like to see included in sample legislation. And something I wanna, just consider, I know right now not much business is being done on public parking spaces on streets on Montgomery Road. There is a plan in place for Montgomery Road to become a little more beautiful, a little more inviting, a little more foot traffic friendly.
Less wide.
Less wide.
So
Dear
we wanna make
God.
sure we're thinking ahead to when Montgomery Road is a little different than it is right now, and I wanna accommodate for the potential that trucks may want to
Yeah.
park there.
Yeah.
So I wanna make sure we keep that in mind, even though right now it is maybe not the most inviting place to
It is
park a
true.
truck. It will be
Especially
one day.
like the old Quality Inn site, if that becomes
Yes.
a place where people are starting to congregate more once it's, not a gravel lot.
Quality Inn.
The,
No, but there's nothing there now.
There-
PLK
It's a
purchased
lovely
it.
field of grass.
a beautiful gravel lot.
That's what Jeff was with.
Yeah, for a while, yeah.
Yeah.
And I wish that we could have a small part of land where Norwood has it, where we can build a food truck.
Yeah.
I have tons of
That's
experience
the
with that. I
dream.
know Amy does as well. Me and Amy have, trust me, tons of experience with building these food truck parks.
Oh, yeah.
Well, start finding places for us and let's
We
talk
can-
about it.
Yeah, we can find a spot in Norwood, because man, you know how much money that brings into
Yep.
the city. When you have those food truck parks and the containers and, oh my God, it brings in so much revenue to that city.
One day.
So,
One day.
What-
So,
Anyway, we'll
next
continue.
steps, I will be sending over these points to our law department and have them draw up like a sample ordinance, and then we can kind of go from there. We can change whatever we feel about it. We will get as much of it translated as possible so folks can have like a full understanding of everything, and we will review it in a month. Let's schedule, maybe? We can. I feel like, does a Monday night work best for everybody?
Yes.
Okay, we will stick to Monday nights then. It is the 26th. We could do September 30th. That's
Monday, 6. That works.
Jeff?
Yep.
Okay, let's do
Monday,
6 p.m.
September 30th
Monday, September 30th.
at 6.
All right.
Small business.
But
Anybody
don't
else
leave,
hungry?
because I have something unrelated to this.
It is actually
I want to
totally
chat with you
related.
guys.
You are allowed to relate it because it's under the same bullet point. I think it counts.
No.
Oh.
I'll do
never
it
mind.
separate.
Never
I'm just gonna
mind.
come chat with you. It won't be council business.
Okay, that is all we have, so we are adjourned. Thank you.
Before we do,
Oh, wait.
I just want to thank you guys personally, like, on behalf of all of us. We really want to thank you for the dialogue and all the community. I think this is how government should work. I know the last meeting that we had, not the one downstairs, but up here, got a little bit of contentious. And emotions got in, said it with me. So I want to thank you guys because, this has a lot of people feeling really grateful that you guys are on council, watching our back. So on behalf of myself, and I know I can speak for these guys, thank you.
Thank you all for showing
Yeah,
up.
thank you all for coming.
Thanks for
Yeah, we
coming.
could
Yeah.
not have this conversation
I
without
mean-
you, and I think it's totally fine and also expected for you to feel passionately and strongly.
Oh, yeah, it's your
About your
livelihood.
Your livelihood.
Yeah,
Thank you, Andy.
yeah,
Thank you for making good food.
yes.
Yes.
Thank you for providing great food options as
Okay.
well in
And
general.
now we are adjourned.
Bye.
Bang, bang.
Here, sorry.